My name is Jean Evely. I have been asked to chair the meeting today on behalf of Newham Transport Action Group and Transport for All, who are the organisations that have arranged this meeting. I would like to thank our candidates for attending. We have Samir Giselle, who is representing the Conservative Party for East Ham. We have Paul Reynolds, who is representing the Liberal Democrats for West Ham, because unfortunately his colleague couldn't attend today. We have Rachel Collinson representing the Green Party, also for West Ham. And we have Stephen Teams, who is our current sitting MP for East Ham, representing the Labour Party. So, the election is just under a month away, so hopefully talking to these four representatives today will give you a good idea of who you would like to vote for if you're still undecided, possibly change your mind if you're not, or confirm what you already suspected as well. So I will give everybody 5 minutes to introduce themselves, and then I will open the floor to questions. I do have to remind you all that these four candidates have very generously given up their time. Although you may not agree with everything that they've said, please be polite and respectful, otherwise I will have to vacate you from the room. Thank you very much. Who would like to start? Left to right, right to left?
CTMP.
I'm happy to start. Would you like me, Jean, to talk specifically about transport or some other disability issues as well?
The way the agenda is set out at the moment, if you just give a general introduction to start with,
Okay.
and then we've broken down into 5 sections, so you'll get specific questions on health and social care, education, transport, and then we've got an open free-for-all at the end to cover all other points.
Okay, smashing. Well, thank you first of all very much for hosting this event and giving us this opportunity. We published our party manifesto on Monday, and I think most of the manifestos have now been published, and ours committed us in the Labour Party always, quoting the wording in the manifesto, to treat sick and disabled people with dignity. So the first thing we want to do is to scrap the bedroom tax. And so lift a source of fear and hardship which has been hanging over 400,000 households ever since it was introduced, 400,000 households with a disabled person living in them who should never have been subjected to the bedroom tax in the first place. I think it's an awful measure, and getting rid of it will be our number one priority. I think one of the things that's gone wrong over the last few years is a real failure to listen properly to what disabled people have been saying to politicians. And so our Disability Manifesto, which is going to be published next Monday, will commit to a consultative committee involving both ministers from across government and also representatives of disabled people themselves, meeting regularly, so that ministers can listen properly to and understand the concerns that disabled people are raising about the things that are going on, and listen to their ideas for improvement. I mean, one very important priority has to be to sort out the shambles with PIP, the personal independence payment. I was speaking to somebody this morning who applied 21 months ago for PIP, and it still hasn't been resolved. I mean, it really has been a terrible, terrible shambles. And a lot of people who used to receive disability living allowance are now extremely worried and don't know what's going to happen to them. That mess needs to be sorted out as a top priority. We want to reform the work capability assessment, and I can talk perhaps in a bit more detail if we get some top discussion about this, about what we'll do to the work capability assessment. But the other thing we want to do is to change the government's work programme, which has been a particular failure for people on employment and support allowance, people out of work on health grounds, fewer than 10% of whom have got a sustained job out of the work programme. So what we want to do is take people on ESA, other than people with just a 6-month prognosis, 6 months or less, take them out of the work programme and set up a new programme which we would roll the current work choice programme into as well. All the jargon here, but a new programme which is committed to helping and supporting disabled people into work. And we want that programme to work much more closely with local authorities and other local agencies in a way that the work programme certainly hasn't done, to, we think, do a much better job of supporting disabled people who are able to work to get into employment and to build for themselves a good future as a result. We think there's a number of other things we need to do with access to work, for example, and no doubt a whole host of issues will be raised in our discussions today. But I suppose the central point I would make is that we have to ensure that people with disabilities are able to play an absolutely full part in the economic life and the social life of our community. And I think we do need to make some quite big changes to enable that to happen. Thank you.
So, thank you all for coming. It's great to see such a varied audience here. So, I live in Stratford in West Ham, and the reason I joined the Green Party was because I am fed up of disabled people being left out in the cold, not just by the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, but Labour as well. I think that we need proper funding for health, social care, we need proper funding for the NHS, and we need to renationalise our public transport system, because what we've seen as privatisation is rolled out across the country is that disabled people get left behind in the rush towards profit. So I came here today on the Docklands Light Railway from Stratford, and I saw no staff at the majority of the stations that I travelled through. And I think this is wrong. I think that Transport for London is being gradually taken to pieces, starting with PFIs under Labour 15 years ago, and continuing under a Conservative and Lib Dem coalition. We're just about to see ticket offices closing and 1,000 people being made redundant. I don't want that to happen. If I were elected, I would fight together with my Green colleagues on the London Assembly to reverse those cuts and provide proper funding for public transport that is accessible to all. In the Green Party manifesto, we want to see a person-centred approach to disability, and we want to treat disabled people and elderly, and particularly disabled children, with the respect and dignity that they deserve. And one of the ways that we need to do this is through inclusive education. So what we want to do is we want to bring back control of education to local authorities, and instead of bureaucrats from Ofsted coming and assessing schools and provision for disabled children, we will have teachers and parents assessing the school's suitability for disabled children, with a view to including everyone and making them all contributing members of society. Finally, we are against pushing people into work. We believe that disabled people are willing to work when they are ready, and we would end the travesty of private contractors assessing people's suitability to work. We believe that this is wrong, because those private contractors are judged by the money they make for the government and not by how they respect people who are in desperate situations most of the time. So we would give back control to GPs and healthcare professionals who really understand the disabilities that they are assessing in order to say whether a person is fit for work or not. So I hope you'll consider voting Green in both in East Ham or West Ham at the general election in May.
Hi, thanks very much for inviting me here, and congratulations to Nunfor in particular for their campaign, which is raising issues in people's minds which are not raised sufficiently enough. say thanks very much, and thanks to everybody for coming along. I want to just talk about two things. One is I want to talk about priorities. For those people who have a disability, be it temporary or permanent, there are difficulties people find in attitude in institutions, where you find, for example, even when Crossrail was being built, there had to be pressure put on the authorities even to provide step-free access in Crossrail. There had to be campaigning to just get them to concede on that. And I think it's the same in education. In education, there's another issue, which is how do people learn about people with disability? It's by having people with disability as their friends at school. And these are important factors in dealing with the problems over the longer term. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the Transport for London approach to disability. It's I used to live in Japan, and it's when you use the transport system in Tokyo, when you come to London, it's utterly shocking how difficult it is for people to get around. And sometimes it's kind of therapeutic for people who are not disabled, to break a bone in their foot and see how difficult it is to get around the tube system, for example, and on buses. And one thing I find really quite extraordinary, thanks to Caroline Vision on the Lib Dem member on the GLA, we uncovered this debacle at Shepherd's Bush Tube Station where £39 million was spent by TfL trying to create step-free access in Shepherd's Bush Station. They didn't complete the project. There's still no step-free access. Can you imagine the amount of money? Only £75 million has been allocated at TfL for providing better disability access at tube stations and in London transport generally, in buses and so on, and Network Rail. I mean, 75. I mean, if you go by the Shepherd's Bush example, it might pay for 2.5 stations to be upgraded to step-free access. It's utterly appalling. Our approach to dealing with this problem is, first of all, the technical approaches to providing step-free access to tube stations is utterly lamentable. There's just not enough money to provide lifts at every station in old Victorian stations. I mean, millions, there are other ways of doing it, and we'll talk about it in the discussion stage. But the other issue is that the stations themselves, many of these old Victorian stations, are worth zillions, and they're not developed, the money's not put into the stations on an individual station-by-station basis. So just using transport as an example, you can really see how the thinking, the people at TfL, and how the finances are organised, you can be pretty sure that they did not have disabled friends at school. So we'll talk about some detail in a moment, but I just wanted to introduce with that particular example. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. As you know, I'm standing in East Town, and throughout the debate today we're going to be discussing various elements and issues associated with disability within the transport system, in particular in London. But let me give you a brief background as to why I think that you should be backing the Conservative Party, and all of this will kind of seep in as we get along further on in the debate. Overall, any changes we wish to make, any investment we wish to make, all hinges on one thing, and that is a strong economy, and not a debt-ridden economy. If we're going to pledge money into services, if we're going to pledge money into infrastructure and investment, which we have done, as I said throughout the debate, we'll talk a bit more about what we have pledged and what we will be putting in, but that hinges on us actually being able to have some money in the bank to realistically not just sit here and say, right, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we've got no means to pay for it. But the reality is we need a strong plan and a strong economy to do so. Whether that means we're going to be putting money into the NHS for services that affect disabled people in terms of the health service, or whether that be in the transport sector, that is what we are planning to do, and we've delivered our manifesto yesterday. And what we plan to do is to keep this economy going, keep it stable. We haven't finished what we started. We've only managed to halve the 3 trillion which was left by Stephen's party in 2010, and we've got a long way to go. But the reality is, and a lot of the smaller parties will always tell you, we can do this, and we can wave the magic wand and eradicate all the problems. But the reality is, it needs to be hinged on the economy working well, and that's what we want in the Conservative Party. We want us to finish the job that we've started. And we have, if we look at numbers of disabled people that are back into work, they're higher post-2010 than pre. We haven't finished the job. We don't think that it's an ideal situation. There are other stations that need, for example, say by 2020 our target is to make all rail vehicles accessible for disabled people. There is still a long way to go. We are far off it, but we're doing our best with the circumstances and the means that we have. The one thing I would always urge you is when voting, and I'm sure no one, I don't doubt anyone's intention or goodwill that is sat at the table, be it from the Green Party or the Liberal Democrats or Labour, but the difficulties of actually being in government and the realities of what you can spend and what you can invest in and the amounts you can invest in, only those parties in government know that. And I think the Lib Dems got a taste of that, and they saw that with their tuition fees debacle, where they just could not hold to promises. And that's just an example of the reality. What we've managed to do is to keep on top of our promises. We've tried to, I know we plan to actually eliminate the deficit, but when you're left with £3 trillion worth of it, and you find out a lot more when you're in office, and you find notes saying that there is actually no money left. Sometimes things do take a bit longer. So the best will in the world, we've tried to do that. But we'll talk on about some more further in-depth issues as we go along. But that's me. Thank you.